This series of videos introduces the 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. It's a project of the Social Change Lab, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Mary Lee bequest for the work of our team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Winifred Lewis, and I'm a social psychologist at the University of Queensland.
Hey guys, I'm Austin Manchadi and I'm a research assistant on this project.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fumigan, and I'm a third-year psychology student.
What we're doing in these video series is making introductions to all 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. And today we're talking about environmental movements and scientific, technological, and industrial change. It's a chapter written by David Hess, who is a sociologist at the Vanderbilt University. I guess the main point in this chapter is that environmental movements don't just want to change political outcomes, they actually want to change industrial systems and technological products and the production of knowledge. I just found this chapter really fresh and fascinating. So when the movements are engaging with these different areas, there's heaps that's going on. One of the sections, the way the chapter is structured, is describing environmental movements and industrial change. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Austin?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to industrial transition movements or ITMs, there tend to be two main types of goals. The first one is a socio-technical or design change where the sunsetting or opposing unwanted industrial processes, technologies, side effects, or technological systems like industrial oppression, and supporting alternative industrial processes, technologies, or technological systems, alternatively industrial development. These things tend to be like fossil fuels and renewable energy as an example. Like we're trying to they're trying to find a better way of using or improving the systems that we already have, as contrast from societal change, which is addressing problems of equality, things like racism, sexism, or homophobia or whatnot, and acts such as access to material and products, and safe employment, and changing the organization form from of industrial production and the governance of the industry and technology in more democratic directions. Giving factories are run to benefit the ordinary people and communities, rather than just the big corporations, and changing the form of industrial production, and attempting to limit jobs that aren't fair on people.
Yeah, that's right. And so, for example, if a factory is changed so that it isn't, refusing to hire people from the local community, that could be an example of that last point. And the second area that the author engages is environmental movements and changes in technology. Why does that work, Rachel?
So in regards to technology is not just a prop. It's not something that we just use. It's not just a medium. It is something that's governed by a lot of political choices.
Mm.
And the design of technology is actually very complicated, intricate, because a lot of it, like how it was referred to in the text, is that something simple like a highway design reflects a lot of racist values, and that's a lot of contestation there, where people argue if it's something that needs to be changed, to be redesigned. And that's where the importance of the role of social movements, like labor, civil rights, that comes in, because that helps to redesign and helps to develop an alternative view into the design of this to benefit the society rather than to harm the society.
Yeah, and so in the environmental context, environmentalists could be arguing about, fracking technology. Should it be used at all? Can it be redesigned? We could look at the technology like cars. So it could be that the technology can be redesigned so it doesn't use fossil fuels and instead uses renewables. And that's actually something that the environmental movement desires and works towards, and people in those industries can be thought of as part of the movement. I found that really interesting, and I found it even more interesting in the last section when they talk about how science and scientists are part of the environmental movement. And the idea here is that people are trying to produce changes in knowledge as part of the environmental movement, and it could be knowledge and awareness of harm that's being done to the environment. And he talks in the chapter about how people even made up new fields like environmental toxicology to measure the poisons that were getting into the environment and into people. And that helped prompt reform and was part of the environmental movement. but also things like the research agendas that people have. Do you choose to study the mobilization of social movements? Do you choose to study a topic relevant to the environment, such as climate change or pollution, or how energy systems connect around the world and into human societies? Or do you choose not to do something? And the author has this great concept called Undone Science, which is that we can understand the science that isn't done as having been informed by the same kind of political choices that Rachel was talking about just now. So if people choose to study how pollution impacts certain neighborhoods and not others, you can bet that they usually are studying, problems in rich communities. And if they choose to listen to voices and scientists participate in partnership with people, they can be relatively privileged people. And an example is this very podcast. So, you folks are university students at a top uni where I'm working myself, and we've chosen to partner with each other. We haven't gone out into the community and listened to the voices of people who are oppressed or who are experiencing pollution, and so or climate change close to the ground. So thinking about the political aspects of science, including what we choose not to study. And I just found that part of the chapter really interesting. I mean, I guess if we're going to close this section, I think that this chapter was probably one of the most interesting that I read. It was so far outside how I had approached the environmental movement, which previously in my work has focused around political attitudes in action, and really invited me to think about myself as a scientist and how, I've chosen to study some topics and not others. And it was interesting too because I read this chapter yesterday, and it was right after a meeting in which I had a conversation with one of my colleagues from Germany about how at their university they had been advised not to study environmental movements because it could be too political, and so it's not good science. And that's an example of undone science at work, when scientists are incentivized through research grants and funding and through the messages you receive to value and study certain things and avoid and leave unstudied certain others. And so you can really ask yourself, well, who benefits if we don't actually study how movements work? That's a really cool question. I just love this chapter. What about you, Austin? How did you engage the chapter?
I think my takeaway is slightly different than yours, but I think yours is fantastic.
Yeah.
The main one for me, it was this sort of weird realization of, we do need technology to advance. A lot of, you
Yeah.
think of environmental movements, you think, Greenpeace and the world being a better place. And you could, in theory, see the book as potentially demonizing technology in factories and being like, well, get rid of it completely, rather than let's integrate it and make it better. So it was somewhat refreshing to hear a rounded position when reading through it and being like, oh, okay, this isn't just, hating on that. This is actually saying, well, we need it. And it gives, I think, a much more mature, broader picture than what I initially sort of predicted was going to come up when I started reading the chapter.
Yeah, I love that point. I just think like thinking about how people who are working in renewable energy, people who are working in all these other technologies that we do need to manage the transition away from fossil fuels, they're themselves part of the movement as much or more than any protester. Or maybe saying more is going to lead to pointless arguments, but as much as a protester, someone who's developing as an engineer these new technologies is really doing great work for the movement. What
Yeah.
about you, Rachel? How did you relate to the chapter?
I think the whole talk about technology and it being a very political item or thing, it's a very interesting point of view because I never considered technology to be political. I thought it was just like, oh, like this is something new and it's something that helps us. But there's always pros and cons to it. And with it being so political, I think it's not so much as Austin mentioned, demonizing technology. It's about the responsible use of technology and how that can advance the society.
Mm.
And with the like how politics governs technology design, I think that needs to be accountability when it comes to everything. So it makes
Yeah.
things fair and equal for everyone.
Yeah, I love that point in the book, which of course makes sense once you think about it and you haven't thought about it before. But it's like how technology is often designed might be, just whatever's convenient or makes money or is fast. And so bringing in that idea of designing technology so people benefit and the environment isn't harmed, or not choosing not to do that, those are political choices. So I think that's a great way to finish the chapter recording. And maybe I'll close by saying thank you to you, Austin, and to you, Rachel, for participating. And thanks to our viewers if you're here till the end of the recording. Bye now.
Yeah.
For those of you watching, be sure to subscribe and follow us at Social Change UQ, and check out our website for more videos.